Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi-Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. Today we have another comedy for the month of April, specifically a very funny month, as we all know. We're talking about Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright, and I am your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan E. Manzur.
I'm a big fan of Edgar Wright. Not so much in this film.
Scott Thurlow.
I've got red on me.
And Christopher Morgan.
Baby Driver.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, I'm right.
Baby Driver is a good one, but not the one that we're talking about today. So, Scott, why don't you kick us off with a funny logline?
Sure. Now listen, we're going to fight the zombies in the streets and in our convenience stores and in the malls and in the pubs. That's where we'll fight them. We'll never surrender.
Wait until you see the whites of their eyes.
Yes.
Ian, why don't you continue on with the plot?
So two bums, one more bummish than the
Two
other.
slackers.
Yeah. One kind of manager of a local electronics store finds this call to adventure when the zombie apocalypse happens and becomes a great leader of men, sort of. In his slacker.
A leader of his slacker group.
Yeah.
And his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Slackerly leader.
Yeah.
And I guess if you want more, they venture forward in a kind of base level zombie apocalypse, no frills zombie apocalypse.
Level 1 zombie apocalypse.
To go to the local pub to
let it all go over.
have a pint, have a lager, and ignore the zombies.
Couple of laughs.
But zombies are zombies. Zombies be zombie.
Zombies going zomb.
Zombies gonna stop, exactly.
And they the zombies get in and people die. But what it really is Edgar Wright for a series of movies created comedy films centered around using the stylistic aspects of the genre
Previous
he was parodying.
Yeah.
So in this he's parodying zombie films, a lot of references to previous works, setting up brick jokes for later films. And overall, it's an entertaining film. I would give it like a 1.5 if possible. So you guys are going to decide whether I'm giving it a 1 or a 2.
Really? All right. I mean, I'm looking at a 3, in fact. And I haven't given out a 3 in quite a while, at least recently. But I think for all the things you just said, right, it's Edgar Wright. It's very British, very clever. And it's his like satire upon and take upon the zombie genre with using all the conventions and tropes, etc., as you mentioned, but having like little subversions here and there upon them, but the baseline like zombie survival plot like still goes along. I think it all works. I think it's paced really nicely. I think it's exactly the time that it needs to be, and there's the character moments are really nicely again like spaced out, like spiked out in a sense. And so yeah, like I don't know, man. Like maybe I might normally give it a 2, like in general, but I don't know. Upon this rewatch, I thought to myself, you know what? This film really holds up quite a bit, and I think it certainly was one of the I guess when the zombie genre was like resurging, if you will, was coming back to life, like he did a really good job of writing the script and directing it and touching upon all those little things that had come before, but also making it its own thing. So I think I'm gonna give it a 3, but I could be talked down to a 2. So with that, go ahead, guys.
It's interesting. I get what you mean, and I think I'm almost in the same boat as you. I think that of all the aspects of this movie, the one that really held up somewhat the strongest is I thought that the plot held together pretty well and like touches on all the standard touchstones of a zombie film while subverting a lot of those tropes, which I guess could go into like themes or style, but as well. But like, but you get this pretty fluid movement throughout the plot, as far as I could, in terms of like kind of how I viewed it. So I don't know if I'm going to give it a 3, just because it's very like it relies upon a lot of tropes to get its plot through, and I'm not saying it does a bad job at that, but it's not super original in any way.
Okay.
I mean, I guess it is pretty original in the aping of a horror movie, right? Like, this is one of the first like times you see a horror movie get that treatment.
Stylistically, it's unique in what it does. Dialogue wise, it's unique. Narratively, I think it narratively needs to be baseline for the style to work. So I'm probably now going to give it a 2, because it needs that kind of it's almost the bland face protagonist, but bland face plot in order to allow. And like, Edgar Wright's never really done the strongest plots, but it's he's known for his it's all about style and visual gags and things like that.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I was back and forth on whether to give it a 2 or 3. I am going to come down on a 2, and here's why. Because it's a fine movie. It holds up. Beth and I really enjoyed watching it again. But the things I loved about it is Edgar. Chris, what's his name?
Edgar Wright.
Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg understand the zombie genre more than most people who actually make zombie movies out there.
Sure.
Agree with that. I mean, because there's a movie that I've been wanting us to review for a long time, and I'll recommend it later, called Return of the Living Dead, which to me was the first.
Love Return of the Living Dead.
I love Return of the Living Dead too. It is the film, but anyway, I'm not gonna
more paramedics.
And it is the film that started Zombies Eat Brains. And it's a really dark film, too. But, I mean, the thing is that Return of the Living Dead is its own narrative. Yeah, they did, there's a whole thing to it. But my whole point is this was an homage. This was a loving homage. These guys had this material, and they didn't treat it as sacrosanct, but they knew the material well. I mean, the snippets of the soundtracks, the Goblin soundtrack from the original Dawn of the Dead, certain little Easter eggs, and then in of itself being a quality zombie movie. I mean, they did a better job than most people who sincerely try to make zombie movies, because they'll fucking usually miss the point, and these guys didn't. They got the social comment. We'll get to it in themes, but narratively, I think it's a 2. I'll get back to the other stuff when we get to themes and style and so forth.
Yeah, I think you guys convinced me, so I'm gonna like sort of cut up. We just recently did Death of Stalin, and I said to you, E, that I'm gonna take out a little bit of a point and put the historical accuracy into style. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, I think I'm gonna put like the way they've done their parody, and like they've certainly done their homework upon the zombie genre, but does not necessarily mean it's the strongest plot. So yeah, right. The baseline stands. I don't think there's a point where I can say like, oh, they should have cut this, or like this should be shorter. But I think for it to work, it has to be that, and no more and no less. So therefore, no more and no less. I'm going to give it a solid 2. Yeah.
All right.
Well done, lads.
2s across the board for that one. And Chris, why don't you talk about the themes?
When I saw George Romero at a convention in the 90s, he once said when he was talking about before Land of the Dead, he was like thinking, because every zombie film was supposed to be a take on the decade it was in, and he was just like, I don't know how you encapsulate the apathy of the 90s, people at Starbucks drinking with, the complacency, I think he said, of the 90s, where we have, it's like zombies walking by where everybody's still like not paying attention, drinking Starbucks, and here he is, he's walking to work. I mean, and the stuff's going on, and everybody's caught in their own little lives, and in just the way humanity is. I mean, it's just like there's a level of apathy, a level of self-involvement. And this isn't a criticism, it's just a reality of who we are. But also, it also touches on his Romero's original intent on of Dawn of the Dead, which was a take on consumerism.
Right.
Zombies as consumers, and then they go to the mall. So my whole point is, I found it great, the fact that, and I to be honest with you, I mean, the slacker genre and the zombie genre, are done to me at this point, but back then they weren't.
Sure.
Like you really have to do something special with them, and I think he did a really good job of using this and like not making a broader statement, but bringing it a down home statement, where you're in the small town, everybody's involved in their lives, and there's this pub, and there's like elements of consumerism and apathy, but there's also a really lovely sense of community. I mean, I'm glossing over a whole lot of stuff because this is why this movie works for me. This movie works for me is because they took the zombie theme and they explored so much other stuff in it about community, about relationships, to consumerism, to the everyday apathy we take as people. I mean, it takes something like a zombie apocalypse for us to be like, okay, people are being eaten, and he's still waking up, going to the store to get his Diet Coke or whatever. I mean, thematically, I think the film's just, I think it's really well done. I think it's just lovely. And it's little wonder Romero is just like, you guys are awesome. Come be in Land of the Dead, which was not nearly as good as this movie is. So,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Good.
I don't know. I completely agree. I think that there is a lot to be said about the take on on a lot of zombie themes that Shaun of the Dead touches off on. And I think you're right. It does do them a lot, as you said earlier, Chris. It does do them, a lot of them, a lot better than a lot of zombie movies that came just before and after. This really touches off on those like cultural touchstones of, I guess, like the early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, like the zombie-ish look of everybody on their cell phones as they go through their life, or like everybody kind of wrapped in their own worlds, not paying attention to anybody else around them before even the apocalypse kicks off, right? And then you see those same characters later, not much changed or whatever, like in their mannerisms,
either
and things like
before or
that.
after being zombified, like basically doing the same shit anyways.
Yeah, which is, it's all an interesting take on things, and you can make arguments for both sides of like whether you think that's right or wrong, but like I think it does do a good job of bringing up those points and showing them. It also definitely touches on like personal relationships and how they're affected by traumatic events, things like that.
Apocalyptic happenings.
Yeah, I mean, which is kind of just reminded me of some like interactions that people are having right now with the shelter in place things, and like trying to get back relationships that have kind of faltered or whatever, or like
lapsed.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like I've talked to a lot of people.
I've been burning even more bridges than lately.
Well, your mileage may vary, of course, but yeah, I mean, I think that this movie does a good job of touching on various themes pretty well, and I'm probably gonna give it a 1.
Yeah. I'm going to agree at the end of the day, like, yes, of course, like I said, they've done their homework. They know their genre quite well. They know how they want to subvert it. They know how to want to, like, mess with the expectations of the audience and just how it usually plays out. So I would give Edgar and company and Simon a lot of credit here and give them a 1.
So if you look at Edgar Wright's body of work, and I've actually seen, if not all of his films, a majority of them.
Yeah.
You have this movie, End of the
Hot Fuzz,
Hot
World's
Fuzz,
End.
World's End, and to a lesser extent, so it's this movie, The World's End, and to a lesser extent, Scott Pilgrim, which is kind of discussing a mournful reflection on the man-child.
I see what you mean.
Because I actually found At the World's End kind of hard to watch at times because
It was one of
its
his
main
weaker
character
films, I
is,
think, for
but
that
not just because,
window.
but just because of how painful the characters were. People who won't who are kind of stuck in ruts and require an event to break them out of it. But in this one, the ending is one of the most depressing things because he ends up marrying the woman he ostensibly loves, but all of her fears of what she would become and being trapped in a dead-end relationship going to the pub at night is founded at the end, and he's still playing video games with his buddy who's more zombified than he was prior, who was locked up in the shed. It's
Yeah,
a
bit of
very
bittersweet touch. Yeah,
and
for sure.
Scott Pilgrim, especially if you look at the original ending where he doesn't get with Ramona and sticks with the underage girl, has that kind of
Vibe to it.
bittersweet quality to it as well. So I don't know. I think that it's there's mournful tone goes through about half of his films, and I think that he's making a comment on
That kind of character.
not only the zombification, but because he's done it in other films too. This person who doesn't.
Cannot or will not.
I actually think Brazil was a great pairing for this film
Mhm.
because the arcs of the main characters are very similar.
Does that mean you're
Yeah,
giving
that's a
Demon
good
the one
point.
though?
All right.
Yeah, I think it all. Yeah, that all is certainly encompassed, and perhaps it adds to the thematic elements. But either way, I think it's pretty strong.
That's going to be ones all around. And we're going to move on to antagonists, and that's going to be me. This is an interesting question, right? Because there is like a person who clearly antagonizes him in David.
Yeah.
There is the overall, I guess, what you would normally expect to be the antagonist, which is zombies, which aren't all that antagonistic towards him, towards the main character. So it's a really strange, like his biggest antagonist is possibly his own like shortcomings and his own like
the man-child mindset.
Right, and just his it's not his views of himself, it's his lack of like self-reflection
Exactly.
that he finally eventually comes to understand. Like he hasn't actually been looking that hard at his own life and understanding how much of
But he doesn't even come to that conclusion at the end.
Right. Well, that's exactly true, but that doesn't mean it's not a good antagonist. That's it. I think that's I think that's what the movie's trying to say, and like I think that's the strongest antagonist in the movie, and it is like you're right. It's a masterful stroke to have the movie end on what ostensibly at first glance is like a really sweet, like, oh, he's saved his friend and he's still hanging out. But also to have that be like the saddest thing in the world, that nothing has changed about his life, even though he said that he was going to change throughout
like
the movie.
Opposite of what they're going to do. Good, Chris. Sorry.
Go on, Steve. I wanted to say, because I have something to add to that, what you're saying.
I mean, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. So go ahead.
Do it up.
In light of what Ian said, in light of what you said, I'm going to say the antagonist is Ed. I hate that character. I was sitting there going, I can't stand this character. And the thing is, he is the enabler. And because he's an enabler.
Are you saying it's Ed's fault that Shaun is like doesn't do anything or try? Like it's
has no motivation or ambition.
He's not antagonistic.
No, I mean, then that would, if I said Ed was the antagonist, that would then absolve Shaun of any responsibility on himself. But I don't know. It does seem to me that it seems to be at the end it is kind of a downer ending, and that the villain does win, and that Ed, he's still catering to Ed at the end, essentially.
Well, think of it this way: as he grows up, he loses his parents. Older friends disappear. He's stuck. He and his loved one are stuck in the fears both of them had for their future, and they still have this leech of an individual who's now an actual parasite in a zombie.
Yeah, literally.
So yeah, it's actually a very, very downer movie. Jesus Christ.
I mean, in a sense, like I'm not arguing about against anything you guys said, but like I think
We kill the fun here at Raw Signals.
but I do think it's a strength again of their knowledge and talent for knowing the genre, knowing the tropes, and playing with them, even if it's not like the sunny happy ending, even if it subverts that as well at the end of the movie. But yeah, I mean, of course, you can say either way. The random zombie horde, of course, that's going to be the case given the setup we mentioned earlier in plot, and then as personified or it's almost like a rom-com where David is his romantic rival, like essentially, right? So like there's like they throw that sort of little like slice of that sort of story into it, but I still think it works on both fronts. And yeah, like the more you think about it, the more we talk it out. It's not as like happy-go-lucky as an ending. Like it's funny. Like now all the zombies
True.
are they can like they have their baseline humanity instincts, so we can like reincorporate them back into society. But that's still like holding him back as a person and his relationship in general as well.
Mhm.
But like maybe that's the best that the character of Shaun could possibly hope for in all of this. So I still think it's effective. I like the fact that since his lack of self-reflection, at least maybe for the first 2/3 of the movie, like, if you will, only exacerbates things really for himself. But I still think it's effective, and I think they knew that writing the script, so I think it shows and goes through the through line. So,
and especially considering his later works, there's definitely a recognition of that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a 1.
I agree. One's all around.
Mhm.
All right, Scott, why don't you talk about the protagonist?
All right, yeah. So speaking of Shaun himself, Simon Pegg, like this is an earlier, like this is from 2007 or 8. So
2004.
Jesus, okay, Christ, goddamn, we're old, and I can't have time anymore. But either way, I just wanted to mention that or make the point of that it sort of put them on the map of like being like sort of I guess the new wave of British comedians, like in a sense, right? So yeah, it all works quite well, and Shaun I think is a well portrayed and well drawn out character for everything we just said. His arc sort of sine waves. He has like low ambition, and then like this catastrophic zombie event forces him somewhat like reluctantly almost into the role, but he does take charge, even though he then finds himself sort of back in sort of a man-child-ish position.
If only the zombie apocalypse had continued, he would have thrived as a human being.
Yeah, but yeah, since it settled down, right? Like it's odd, but I do think it's a very interesting arc, even if he doesn't necessarily grow and or change and or learn to the degree that we want him to do as an audience. But I still think, again, the portrayal and the writing like works together to make, if not a fully sympathetic character, a character you can get behind and understand his motivations and get little slices of who he is and then what he's trying to do. Given the zombie apocalypse to spur him to like sort of reconcile with his stepfather, who then of course turns into a zombie the moment he has like a heart-to-heart like talk with him, right? Like that's a funny subversion too. It's also sadly like
it's how life works, you know. You get to know someone, like them, and then
and then
they try to eat you. It's terrible.
Boom, zombie.
Yeah. So, but I do think it works. Like again, Simon Pegg's portrayal and how the character is written, I think all coincides to equate a very strong one for me on this question. So
yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't think I have too much more to say. It just I think that this is kind of how the world was introduced to Simon Pegg, I think, or most people,
exactly.
Right? And like I think it was, especially in 2004 when I first saw it, this was like kind of a breath of fresh air and in a sea of not great movies, I guess.
A little sea of zombie movies.
Yeah. Not great zombie movies and things like that. So it was nice to get this and get introduced to, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Edgar Wright movies in general. That being said, I think that Pegg's character, Shaun, in this is well realized, and especially talking about all the things that we just talked about in terms of him not, like his character development kind of retracting at the end. I think it's a really fascinating arc that he goes through to come all the way back around to the other side of the circle. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yep. Is that yes, Chris?
Yeah.
So you haven't spoken much about it yet. So
because I had nothing else to add to what you said. So
no, we covered it. Fair enough.
Set. All ones?
Yep. I think so, sir.
Okay. Ian, we should talk about supporting characters.
This is tough for me because there's some. Nick Frost does a good job, but he's unlikable character in this.
On purpose, though.
No, on purpose it is. But does that make it a engaging character? Just because it's doing what it was intended to do doesn't mean that I'm in love with the portrayal or the character itself. I like the fact that his girlfriend kind of mirrors his mother in certain ways, which also is talking about the infantilism of the modern male. I have to be very academic with that.
Sure.
But overall, I think that most of the supporting cast is fairly one-dimensional. So I'm leaning towards a 0 right now.
I was a bit torn as well because I totally see what you mean. Like, yeah, of course, like, at least not of course, I guess I'll say, but Nick Frost is the perfect foil. Like you said, like, Chris, I think you said, like, he's enabling his friend, in fact, to, like, holding him back in, like, the infantile mindset, in a sense. But I think his character, like, the way it's portrayed makes sense. They clearly intended it to be that. So, like, while you might say, like, Liz and even, like, their friends, like, Dave and whatever, his girl, Diane, I believe, is Dave's girlfriend's name.
Yep.
So, like, yeah, it's a small, tight-knit group, and his mom and his stepfather, Philip. So it fills out the world, even if they are, for the most part, 1.5 at most, like, dimensional, like, drawn out. But, like, you can see, like, aspects of Shaun's life, like, via these characters. So I don't know, man. I'm still a bit torn, but I'm maybe leaning slightly towards the 1, but I'll open it up. What do you guys think about them?
This is interesting. Like, none of these characters change. The only ones that have arcs are Shaun and Ed, I guess. But they all kind of come back to, like, even down to, like, Ed making a fart joke as his last words, you know? Like, they all come back to where they started. And the other characters never change at all. They are there.
In fact, they might even regress, you might say.
To be, yeah, but I mean, they're just there to be those characters and, like, fill their part in the world, but they're not. There's no, you know, growth or anything, other than maybe his stepfather, who has that, like, impassioned speech right before he dies.
Yeah, and even that sort of played for laughs in a sense.
But it is like it is like a different side of him than you've seen before. Like, that's the only character I think that really happens with, outside of
his mother. A little bit has the discussion with Liz at the end.
Sure.
Yeah,
but not it's not memorable particularly.
Well, like, no, I think that the scene with him and his mom right before she dies is memorable, but I don't think it's like a change of character from anything that we've seen before with her.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's like, you're right. Like, all these characters are one-dimensional. I think that's on purpose, but
that means they're not,
and supports the, you know, the some of the themes of the movie. But that doesn't mean that they're good characters.
As characters unto themselves, yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to very much pre-Tick Peter Serafinowicz as the roommate.
Sure.
I'm very sad to say that the Tick is gone now, has been canceled. But
that's fair. But even he was one-dimensional.
It was so weird to see him, like, pop up. I was like, oh, I completely forgot he was in this movie.
And don't forget Martin Freeman's cameo.
Oh yeah, Martin Freeman as
I mentioned that to Eve when we were watching it. Yeah,
as the Liz of the other group.
Yeah, but no, I think you guys are right, or at least have convinced.
He's such a Liz.
Yeah, it's perfect matching.
You're so Liz.
All that to say, like, I think you guys convinced me at least that I'm gonna lean now on a softer maybe, but still a 0 for secondary because of that. It might be intentional, but does not make them fully fleshed out characters and or have meaningful arcs. So
yeah, I think it boosts the theme and
yeah.
But you can't give it
service,
one for supporting.
Right.
Okay, before we move on, I'll speak about the supporting characters.
Please.
Been waiting.
Yeah. First of all, I'm sticking with Ed being one of the antagonists because I can't. I absolutely hate the character.
Okay.
I mean, I understand why he's there, But my biggest problem with, because I agree with you all, I'm going to give supporting a 0. My biggest problem with supporting cast was, except for David, I really wanted to know these people better. I really wanted to know Aunt Hildy or Diane. I really wanted to know.
That's where I know her from.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure that out the whole movie, and I couldn't. Yeah.
But I really liked her character, and I was really interested in her character, and that really pissed me off when she did that really stupid thing by going after David in the end.
He's such a twat.
Yeah, but that's like it's a cliche move, like right, like that's their like adhering to the template of zombie movies, I would say.
But yeah, I mean, I think there are times where even if this were, I think they could have taken a bit off on certain scenes and added a little more character, because a lot of the characters I really wanted to know more, and the reason I'm giving it a 0 is because they were a lot of them were underdeveloped. I don't think they had to be, and I don't think it would have taken much more to develop.
Yeah, but Edgar Wright's gotten better over the years developing characters.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Without question.
Early iteration. That's true.
Without question. I know this is one of his first films, but just judging it, that's why I'm giving it a 0. That's all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's probably a softer 0, but it's definitely.
Yep, I pretty much agree.
All right, so we're all going to give that one 0s. Chris, keep talking. Dialogue.
So your dialogue
out. These guys precast. I wanted dialogue because there was one gigantic fucking Easter egg that
somehow you missed.
That's like, I don't believe I got it when Ed's like, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," when they go to their house.
Which is Shaun's mother's name, yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck. How the hell did I not remember this from like the play on Night of the Living Dead? I like the dialogue quite a bit. They really could have gone overboard. It could have definitely been one of those films where every bit of dialogue was kitschy and a callback. And the reason that one stands out is it was because after seeing Night of the Living Dead 100,000 times, I should have picked that up. But what I'm saying is the fact that that Easter egg got by me speaks a lot to the dialogue, that it wasn't full of like, winks and, references. The dialogue's very naturalistic. It works. A lot, it's the delivery of the dialogue's great, but like I said, it's not, it's obviously Edgar Wright's, first film. It's obviously Simon Pegg, one of Simon Pegg's first films, because, his writing's gotten better as well. But I think the dialogue was nice. I enjoyed the dialogue. I was invested in it. The dialogue got me invested in a lot of things, and it very well in a movie like this, which I'll get to more in theme, in style, is when you have a movie like this and you can definitely play up the kitsch, you can definitely play up the references and the Easter eggs. Yeah. It was extremely a restraint, and it really stayed focused on its world.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something quite that I'm gonna build on. Like, it was clearly like Edgar and Simon's like their sort of first draft of them like entering like the mainstream sphere. So like while it still works, I'm giving it a 1 for sure. But I think it got, as they worked more closely and got better and better at it, it was better in later films like Hot Fuzz, like Baby Driver, etc. But it still works here. And like, yes, there are a lot of good brick jokes, which maybe bleeds over into style. Like that's probably like one of the biggest aspects to me that works quite a bit. And like the callbacks and that, like the exacerbate thing, like this and that, like they're coming to get you, Barbara, all that stuff, like all the shout outs to either previous things, established things, or things they set up as internal character moments that then, boomerang back later, all works overall pretty solidly for me to give it a solid 1 on dialogue, even if they sort of one up themselves in later actual films. So.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Eddie.
I can't divorce dialogue and style when it comes to this because it's inherently a comedy movie. And Edgar Wright is known for his style, first and foremost.
Sure.
In fact, I've heard him described as a style over substance director, even though I disagree with that assessment. I think that, though, that his dialogue is memorable. It does get better in later movies, but this is still like
so, right? Yeah.
It works functionally as a comedy movie with balancing visual gags and fun dialogue with a reference
and stuff. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not just reference of modern times, as in like often terrible comedies do, but it's referential to previously done horror films. So.
Yeah, it's
and callbacks. There's so many callbacks in this fucking movie. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they're very like subtly and seamlessly integrated. So
it's wild. There are callbacks upon callbacks and callbacks to like they have callbacks to like other movies and shit. Like, you know, the well, not just a reference, but like, you know, that lampshading other movies and things like that. But I love the dialogue in this. I love kind of everything, and later movies having later Edgar Wright projects having better dialogue, notwithstanding, which of course is definitely true. Like, you know, you have Hot Fuzz, you have Baby Driver, you got Scott Pilgrim is even like really good dialogue wise, but like this film, the script in this is really good and well pulled off by its actors. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost obviously have really great chemistry.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about the dialogue. I'm going to give it a 1.
Very nice.
So that's 1s all around for dialogue.
I think so.
And that's going to lead to style with me. And yeah, Edgar Wright, he's style master. He knows what the genre he's working in looks like. He knows how to make it funny. He knows how to
keep it moving.
He knows how to make it also like serious when it has to be. Like there are a couple scenes in this that like are really impactful. And
for sure.
It's a good balance that he strikes. I think that he really he's kind of like Dan Harmon, from back then. Like, he understands genre really well, and he knows how to work within any given genre that he's working in. And I mean, I got to give style full marks.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree, or actually 100% agree, and only have a few things to add. Is that I thought you might mention the soundtrack, the style, like the Queen songs, like that show up here and there. Get like they're perfectly like fitting for the scenes that are happening in which they appear in. And yeah, like even like the cut, like for example, Shaun describing, we'll go rescue Mom, we'll kill Philip, like right, the quick cuts. That again is an early iteration of Edgar Wright's style, which you then see like he builds upon that in later things. But even so, it's very nicely integrated here. And all just in general, like again, going back to what we said about the plot, they have a good understanding of the genre they're trying to like work within, and then subvert and/or parody, and then but keep it serious as well, and all of that is balanced very, very nicely. So
I think Edgar Wright is more intelligent than I am, or cleverer than I am, at least, because I actually love going and watching people's videos on YouTube where they break down scene by scene Edgar Wright films to describe what they're referencing in the scene, or something he had hidden in the background. And this got more pronounced as he went along, but this by no means is a stranger to. He'll shoot a scene specifically because this was a random horror film, right? Or especially in the beginning of this film, it'll be like he'll add in stereotypical like jump scares and how horror movies do it, but for the comedic effects. And I don't know, he's cleverer than I am.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily. I mean, think what you want about his cleverness. He certainly is like has a way of
detail oriented.
He certainly has a way of doing that, but like it's clear he's like a huge student of film.
Yes.
Like any movie that he does, not only I'm sure does he do a lot of like research on it once he starts the project, but I'm sure he has this gigantic, history of seeing movies in this genre and like kind of the ideas of what he wants to do with it. Like it's clear he's studied how to successfully make a scene work in like, a zombie movie or whatever, it's like, obviously he likes Romero. Just you can watch this movie and know that he likes Romero.
No, he understands Romero. He understands Romero.
He
sure.
likes and understands.
No, there's a difference between liking and understanding.
I'm just saying Edgar Wright, I believe, covers both. Chris is all. Yeah. Good, Steve.
You're right. I like Romero, and I probably couldn't Well, I don't know. Give me a bunch of money. See if I can make a movie this good. Anyway, yeah. I mean,
Well, I'll certainly do as good as Latter Day Romero.
Wow. Fair enough.
my word.
Either way, I think style is one of the strongest.
So I think we're all putting in a 1, right? Chris, what did you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, to both Pegg, because with his Star Trek Beyond script, and to this film, and to is that both of these guys have a passion for, and understand the stuff they write about, even if it is derivative, and I don't mean that in a negative connotation. I mean,
it's derivative.
This is
right?
what?
Yeah. They're doing it on purpose. I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, but they do it, and they do things really nicely without, like I said, hitting you over the head with it. And I'll not knock on some of these things, but I'm going to point out a couple little things that I loved. First of all, the when they have the cuts, it's like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. The music playing is Goblin's music from the original Dawn of the Dead when they're running around the mall. I thought that was really sharp. I thought starting off the opening when you see like the Universal title or whatever, there was some Goblin music there. The place he works at is Foray Electronics. Ken Foray played Peter in the original Dawn of the Dead, and I thought it was interesting that Peter Serafinowicz' character was named Pete. So I kind of wondered, like, Peter's everybody's favorite character in that movie. And then there's like little things like in Dawn of the Dead where, and we'll talk about this when we get there, that Galen Ross says it really is all over, isn't it? When she's watching the TV, and it has world of connotation to it. And Liz in this says there really is, what does it say? There's no one beyond there, is there? Like, in other words, it was a nice Easter egg. It was not a quote. It was not
a direct thing, but if you know it, you know it. Yeah.
But it was this character looking at the TV and reacting to the TV in a sense that had larger implications, like, that, which goes to my understanding of the material. You don't have to keep using the same dialogue. You don't have to, the Foray Electronics is neat, but to have a scene like that where a character is going to make the same statement, but just do the dialogue, to me, as a fan of this genre, I just found that such a lovely little treat. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Wright's. I'm sorry, Baby Driver. I love this movie, but Baby Driver's a masterpiece. It was out.
Sure, I'm saying, like,
question, a masterpiece.
I think you proved all our points where you can see the sort of arc where he started here, and like then you get to Baby Driver, like using all the elements that he built upon. But yeah, style still stands for Shaun of the Dead for sure, pretty strongly.
Mm-hmm. Learning about Baby Driver after we reviewed it, I realized how much I have yet to learn about being a movie critic and a style critic as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
But in terms of that, we're all giving this a 1, right?
Yes.
Ones all around, pretty strong ones, I believe.
I don't think you can not give him Edgar Wright O style.
Tough to give Edgar Wright a style 0.
You decided to try to give Edgar Wright a 0 here.
All right. Well, let's move on to recommend. Scott, kicks off.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I think it holds up quite well. So technically, it's your pick, Steve-O, for the big genre comedy month. But yeah, it's a 16-year-old film now. Jesus Christ, it still holds up. It still has its parody. In fact, it probably holds up more completely than many other films from that era, like we said, that are trying to do serious things, or even in the same vein. It's still very, very watchable, and the jokes still land. I don't think there's anything that like ages it or places it like, oh, that's like a meme from 10 years ago.
Him using instant camera.
All right,
100%
small
dated.
Things,
yeah.
But I'm just saying, in general, yeah, I think it holds up damn nicely, and it's still very enjoyable, and you can see it for what it is, and get some of the references and so forth, homages that he put in without being derivative, without just like ripping them off completely. And still entertaining and funny and really enjoyable. So definitely recommend it.
I will say that camera gag is one of my favorite jokes in the movie, though, when like they're just like both like slack-jawed looking at the zombie, and then he starts winding it. And Simon Pegg slaps it out of his hand. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it. That's why I'm recommending it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to
Okay.
recommend it for sure. I chose this movie. It's a film that I've been wanting to watch again for a while. You know, I loved this movie when it came out. I don't know if I'm quite as in love with it as I was then, but I still really, really
Still
enjoyed it.
Damn
And
solid though, right?
yeah, and yeah, I would recommend it as you know, I would recommend it over like the satire or like comedy takes on genres in terms of like movies like Naked Gun or like Scary Movie were always like weird to me. Like I like those
Shots.
movies. Hot Shots. Like I like those movies,
Gun
but
is
they're
fantastic, by the way. I just watched it recently.
I like they always seemed strange to me, and I really enjoy something that is actually trying to do this genre that it's aping, like that it's making fun of. Which those movies are just comedies that have
O.J.
like,
Simpson kills it in it.
Wow.
see, this is a joke that would happen in one of those movies.
Yeah. That's why he made it.
But like
Oh,
Shaun of the Dead was like the first like
Go on.
like rip off of a genre movie, like comedy, that like really embodied all the elements of that genre. That like
You're saying it lives
if
in
that
both
makes
worlds.
sense.
Yeah, it can both pull off the actual genre that is,
Yeah.
and then pull off the parody as well at the same time.
It is a horror movie, whereas Naked Gun is not actually a cop movie. It's clearly just a comedy. Like, you know. And I have to give it full credit for that. So I definitely recommend it.
And like those scary movies and stuff like that, they are all referential. They are. I mean, they're exactly and those things to me are completely hit or miss. But this is exactly what those are the movies I exactly was saying before. This is not, and I agree with you. This is in of itself a good movie, a good zombie film, nice little piece of parody. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Like I said, it's definitely his first film. It's it's not flawless, but it's definitely worth a watch.
By the way, Scream was a meta-commentary satire on horror movies made by John Carpenter when he was getting in that phase. And Scary Movie was a parody of a satire.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That frustrates me to no end. Go ahead.
That's its own separate thing.
He is driven crazy by this.
Yeah.
But it's weird because comparing it to other Edgar Wright films, I wouldn't recommend this first. In fact, this is I have this fourth on the line. Hot Fuzz is one of my favorite comedies of all time, and that is my go-to one. But you guys made a really good point of bringing up all the other failed monstrosities of satire that exist in our on this wasteland that we call popular culture. So yeah, I guess I would have to. I mean, it's digestible and it's at 99 minutes, I think. So and I think that it appeals on multiple layers.
Yeah,
you can like it if you're just interested in kind of fart gags and thing, and also if you're like Chris, who's a huge fan of the genre, you get a lot out of it as well.
Right.
One more thing I want to say is I trash Edge a lot because I do think he's a villain, but there are things that Beth and I laugh at, like when he wants to drive the Jaguar, so he crashes the other, which only shows his selfishness. I mean, it is not an asset to his character, but that doesn't mean it's like the camera gag. It's still fucking funny.
Yeah, sure. He's like, oh, I guess we'll have to take the Jag, right? Like, he has the perfect British face and again, like cadence to it. Anyway, so where's that leave us, Steve-O?
Yeah, so unless I've been mistaken, we all gave this an 8 for all the same reasons.
Nice.
We all took a point off in plot, and we all gave supporting characters a 0. Despite the fact that there were some supporting characters, they did not really have arcs, we thought. So, yeah, it's going to be 8s all around, which is an aggregate score of an 8 for Shaun of the Dead.
Damn fucking solid.
Unless anyone else has anything else to say,
I do. I'm going to say this right now because it bothers me. It's not about this film per se. I hate the zombie movie trope where they pretend to be zombies and can. I loathe it. I watched The Walking Dead until that scene happened in the first season, and
Is
I
this the
stopped
first
watching.
episode?
That was the second episode.
Oh, okay.
I stopped watching after that because I'm like, once you establish this rule in this universe, it breaks everything within it. Fuck you. And this one, yes, the comedy film, I'll let it pass. But I absolutely
It's one of his pet
loathe.
peeves.
I love that that the failed actresses are like artist's method. She's like trying to use her acting skills. I mean, I mean,
Sure.
it works in this context because
Within world, it's fine, but
they set up that she's a failed actress or whatever, and then the second they need to know what to do, Shaun immediately looks at her and bam, it was a really nice. If you're gonna do it, that's the way to do it.
It is kind of a silly trope, but obviously they're making fun of it in this.
That's why I
That's why
forgive
it's
it in
good
this.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
Anyway, all right. So that's gonna do it for us.
Yep. It's pretty.
I
fun
have
to
been 8, pretty good. I think it's fitting for this film, and I've been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined tonight by Christopher Morgan,
When there's no room in hell, we'll go get a pizza.
Jonathan E. Mazur,
I have no sentimentality, so you don't have to worry. I will shoot you if you're about to turn into a zombie.
and Scott Thurlow.
Dogs can't look up. It's a fact. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?